Hey JC Youth, welcome to JC Youth Online today. I'm Scott, I'm the youth pastor at Journeys Crossing. And normally because fun is such a huge value for our youth groups, like God designed fun, so getting to know the God who made fun shouldn't be boring. Because of that, we'd normally be starting out this morning with some game or funny video or something crazy, but today we're gonna be doing things a little bit differently. This week, our church is joining in on a conversation in our main adult services that I feels like our whole country is involved in at the moment, an important one about racism. Now, I want to walk you through what's going to happen today. So today, you're going to be hearing from our lead pastor guy, Mark, and he's going to walk you through some really helpful stuff about racism and how we need to think about it as Jesus followers. And then we'll get to listen in on a conversation where a bunch of your parents, parents of teens in our youth groups who are people of color, are going to talk about their experiences with racism in this country and how we can live and be a church that's against racism. So I want to invite you to be present in this conversation, to listen and to really kind of take in what we're talking about. I know you've been watching what's happening in our country this past week. I know the death of George Floyd breaks your heart like it does mine. I know some of you are angry about it, some of you are scared by it. Some of you just don't know how to help or engage the conversation at all. I've marched alongside some of you this week in peaceful protest. I've gotten to talk to you and watch you lead. I got to go to Bethesda and be a part of a group where hundreds of people came to see what's next and march together, an event that was organized completely by teenagers. Let's become people who change the culture. And this conversation is going to be helpful in that. So sit back and let's join in the conversation.
When I look into the face of my enemy, I see my brother. I see my brother. When I look into the face of my enemy, I see my brother. I see my brother.
Hey, Journeys Crossing. I'm excited about today, and I'm also nervous because today what we'll be talking about is the beginning of a much longer and broader conversation that is long overdue. And I'll explain in just a moment why it's challenging, as many of you probably know. But if you have not crawled out from underneath a stone lately, you know that our media has been saturated with news of just horrible situations. On May 25th, we probably know that Minneapolis police officers arrested George Floyd, a 46-year-old black man, after a deli employee called 911 because he was buying cigarettes, what they thought was with a counterfeit $20 bill. But what happens, as many of us have seen in that video, is totally unacceptable. We see the last minutes of his life ebb away as police officers kneel on his neck and as they press him to the ground, and we hear him screaming, "I can't breathe," and he cries for his mother. You can't watch that video and not be torn up inside when we see someone's life taken so quickly and so needlessly. The problem is that this is just one story in a string of thousands. But it has become a tipping point, a sort of, I think, Band-Aid that's being ripped off of something that's been bubbling underneath our culture for centuries. And I'm excited that we begin this conversation at Journeys Crossing and take it to another level but I'm also very nervous. I'm scared, and not so scared that I don't think we should have this conversation. But if you're a person who follows social media of any sorts, or you follow the news, you see that there are so many different perspectives on this. And I know without a shadow of a doubt that there will be plenty who disagree with something that I say or something that's said up here today. And then there will be people on the other side who say, we didn't say enough, or we have much more that needs to be said. But regardless, I think the important thing is that we are having the courage to begin this conversation that's long overdue. And my hope and my conviction is that we will find ourselves in a new time in our nation where racism, systemic racism, injustice, prejudice towards people of different ethnicity or skin color, that those things largely begin to fade away in a way that never has up to this point in our nation's history. That is my hope. That is many of our hopes. That is our dream. And then the part that I'm most excited about is I have some friends up here who are people of color, my black friends, brothers and sisters, who get to share their perspective, who get to share some of the solutions that they think we should suggest. And I think we should all lean in and listen. Close our mouths, be unjudgmental, be undefensive, and simply listen, because we have not done that enough. Sometimes, though, before we can stand up together against some injustice, it's important that we sit down together. So I want to invite some friends up right now to continue this conversation, because they know much more about this than I do. And I want us to listen, and I want us to hear, and I want us to learn so that we can move forward from today. Would you welcome my friends? So I want to introduce to you, this is Tim Walker, Carla Rush, Addie Momeyer, and Kevin Page. Thank you so much. I feel like I'm on one of those talk shows, you know? As long as it's not Maury or something, we're okay, right? So why don't you guys just give a brief introduction, tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been coming to Journeys Crossing, family stuff, what you do, whatever you think would be helpful for people that don't know you. We'll start with you, Tim.
All right. Again, my name is Tim Walker. I've been coming to Journeys Crossing for about 7 years. Married, be 3 years in August, to my wife Sharon. We have a blended family, 3 kids. I'm a chef for a hotel chain, and just glad to be here.
An amazing cook, chef. I mean, ooh, yeah.
Thank you.
Carla.
I'm Carla Rush. My beautiful family, my husband John, and our 4 children have been coming to JC for about 15 years. I'm a stay-at-home mom and a community volunteer. I am the NAACP Parent Council rep at Churchill High School. Through the years, I've been the rep at Beverly Farms Elementary and Hoover Middle School. So as my kids progress through, I have as well.
That's awesome.
It's a great organization.
Hi, I'm Addie Momeyer. My husband Tim and I and our 3 kids have been coming to Journeys Crossing since 2012. I am currently a stay-at-home mom. I am also an attorney. I spent the bulk of my career doing public interest work at the Maryland Legal Aid Bureau, representing poor and low-income members of different communities throughout the state of Maryland. And I'm really happy to be here and hoping that some great things will come out of this conversation today.
I'm Kevin Page. Been coming to Journeys Crossing since 2008, so for 12 years. Yes, that's right. We got here in 2008, like I said. We've, Branding, my wife, been married almost 20 years. And we have 3 beautiful daughters. The oldest, which just recently graduated high school, so
Congrats.
Shout out to Lex. Excited to be here, excited to, get this conversation started, and, it's time. So thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. One of the things I think we said earlier as we were talking is, while we're starting this conversation here kind of in a more determined manner as a church, for many of you, it's just been a conversation that has been something that's been your entire life. And that must be exhausting. Anybody want to speak to that?
Well, I think it's interesting that this latest incident is the one that's brought us to this point of outrage, because these videos are a continuous thing. The year changes, maybe the sex changes, the name changes, but the race is always the same. And I'm not sure what's brought everyone across racial lines to this point of outrage, to where there's protests and people finally speaking up saying it's not right. It's atrocious acts that are taking place against the people of color. It's got to stop.
Well, I think a good way to jump into that discussion is to really help people understand what people of color are talking about when we talk about white privilege and when we talk about systemic racism. Because I think, unfortunately, there is a knee-jerk reaction for people on the other side of that conversation to become very defensive when they hear white privilege. And I think it needs to be understood that, and I'll speak for myself personally, I am not expecting, my white friends, my white brothers and sisters, or anyone white for that matter, to apologize for being white any more than I would be expected to apologize for being black. But I think in order to really understand this conversation, you have to understand that when we say white privilege, we need folks to understand that just by virtue of the fact that we are people of color, there are situations that we have to deal with and circumstances that we encounter every single day that people who are white don't understand and don't have to deal with. And so when you come from a place of defensiveness, or you don't acknowledge that white privilege exists, it's like you're minimizing what we are experiencing every day. And if you're not able to even acknowledge that it exists, then it's going to be really difficult to get to a point where we can have a discussion about how to eradicate it. And that kind of ties in with the discussion about systemic racism. A lot of times when you talk about racism, people become defensive and say, well, I'm not racist. I have black friends. I have black colleagues. I'm not a racist person. But systemic racism is more, it's ingrained in pretty much everything that we do in society. It becomes, it's so insidious that it infects the way we think and the way we see things, and sometimes we don't even realize it. And I'll give you an example of that because you asked about how racism has affected us, and I use this example because it's kind of vanilla, but I think if you can understand how this equates to systemic racism, then you can kind of understand how it leads into bigger things. So when Jasmine was born, Tim and I lived in Tacoma Park, which is a very racially diverse area, very highly Hispanic community. So it wasn't an area where you'd be surprised to see people of color or big couples or anything like that. And there was a day I had just taken Maya to the bus stop. I was walking back. I had Jasmine in the little carrier on my chest. And there was an older white lady walking the same direction as I was walking. And she started speaking to me. We talked for a second, and she said, "Oh, the baby is so cute. Are you her nanny?" And that might, to some people who don't understand what systemic racism is, might think, oh, well, she just didn't know. But you have to ask yourself, if she saw a white woman with a black baby, she probably would have thought, oh, she just adopted this little black baby.
Right.
And so this idea that you see someone, a black woman with a baby that you think is white, and you automatically assume that I'm the hired help and not the child's mother.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thought processes that we as a society sometimes have, and I think is indicative of systemic racism.
That's
Yeah.
what's exhausting. The microaggressions on a daily basis, it's cumulative.
Yeah.
So you sort of build up an armor, you're expecting, and most likely you're going to get them. You can speak out on them though. I mean, that's part of bringing a greater understanding to it. Is if that's said to you, why would you ask that? Why would you ask if I'm the nanny?
Mm-hmm.
What made you come to that conclusion?
Yeah.
You call people on it sometimes, and then they think about their own actions. That's part of understanding your own privilege. It's not about what you have access to having privilege. It's about what you haven't had to go through. So if you can accept your privilege and analyze it, then you can maybe see where you can use your privilege to help someone who's maybe in the opposite position, someone who doesn't have that same privilege.
And sometimes just being a black man in America, you have to really think forward how to dress yourself in the morning. What should you wear to be accepted from others? And maybe you don't have to deal with that, but sometimes it's all about the colors you wear, how you wear your hat or your baseball cap, just to be accepted by others. And it shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be like the color of your skin or how you dress or how you look.
Absolutely not.
It's just like me going into Nordstrom's and wearing sweatpants and Timberland boots. They're looking at me thinking I'm about to steal something, which I'm just browsing and shopping like everyone else. And then when I put my Nordstrom card down, it'd be like mindset changes. Hey, Mr. Walker, how you doing? Welcome back to Nordstrom's. But when I walked in the door, it was a whole different perspective. And those are the things that we have to deal with every day.
I think it's important for people to know that when the way that you enter the world every day is dramatically different. The mindset, the posture, you're always on alert. That white people don't necessarily have to face the world that way. And when you have to always be watching your behavior or thinking, is this going to do something? I can't imagine how exhausting that must be.
Sorry, it literally boils down to that. Like Tim said, you think about what you're going to wear. Of course, everyone thinks about what they're going to wear and, is someone going to like this particular shirt or this particular dress or skirt? For me, it's you already feel piercing eyes, especially growing up where I did. You just have piercing eyes just from walking down the street, just that people are disgusted at your existence, your mere existence. But then it boils down to, okay, when I wear this shirt, not only is someone going to like this shirt, it's, well, they're going to perceive me this way. Like it even gets down to the minutia of what I'm going to wear. How is this going to perceive? How many piercing eyes are going to be? And you're right, it is exhausting. We live it every day. But it's just, and I don't know how many people, go through that again, but I know for me, it is an everyday thing of just piercing eyes, just walking down the street or walking down and the doors locking and, moving the cars to the side or, just the grotesque of my existence in someone's world. It is a constant thing, even here in Montgomery County.
Saying that you have black friends is not, proximity to blackness doesn't make you not a racist.
Right.
It is purposeful, intentional work that goes into not being a racist. It is being aware of what you are doing every day, and even so far as being an ally in this fight, is you calling out your friends who are making these racist comments, racist jokes, and saying, that's not right. That's racist what you just said.
Right. That assumption is racist, right? There's so much beneath it. It doesn't even have to be this aggressive behavior that we have to learn to confront one another about. It can be what could be a neutral seeming behavior, but it's really not, because it has this stereotype or this imaging built into it that's wrong, right?
Oh, I was just going to say, you started this conversation off talking, taking it back to a biblical place. And I think it's really important, as a society at large for us to be having this conversation, but particularly as Christ followers. I mean, I believe in the book of James, it talks about us bearing one another's burdens.
Right.
And just as you were alluding to the exhaustion that people in the Black community have, I mean, it is exhaustion, and we can't overcome this just on our own. We need people outside of the Black community, in the white community, who say that they, are behind this, to not only be behind it in their words, but be behind it in your actions. As just was said, think about your own interactions. That conversation that, the white coworkers are having that may be racially insensitive when there aren't any people of color around to hear it. And also, being willing to really step up. I mean, words are great, but at the end of it, it's what are you willing to do to see a difference happen? And I think as Christ followers, more than just the average Joe, I think just as human beings, we're all called to act, but specifically as people of faith, this has to be something that we take seriously and that we decide we're going to be active and progressive.
When you look at your friendship circle, your true friendship circle, what does that look like? I mean, your friendship circle has to be diverse for you to really understand the issues that people of color are facing, for you to really have a good grasp of it. It's not something that you just say, oh yeah, I know Carla, yeah, she's my friend. Am I hanging out with you on a regular basis? It's important.
It's not Facebook friends, right? It's not just Facebook friends.
Not
That's
just
not
Facebook
a
friends.
friend. That's an acquaintance.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Just
go ahead.
reaching out as far as your true friends, instead of just meeting them on Sunday, reach out during the week, if they need something from you, or, if you can help them with anything, that will show your generosity of being a true friend, not just waiting till Sunday to see you and say, how was your week? What did you do? Or, if you're going out for a beer or a drink, let's meet up on a Wednesday or something. Let's just talk about,
Let's do life together, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's what it is.
I think we have to be intentional and purposeful about inviting people who may be different than us into our inner circle. And we have to be hungry to learn and to suspend judgment and to hear and to embrace with grace. And when that begins to happen, it's a blessing.
Yes.
I think people that haven't done that in their circles of friendships, inviting a diversity of people, are missing out. But that's a very important thing that those of us at Journeys Crossing can do, is to be intentional about having those in-between Sunday relationships that are much deeper than Facebook.
Yes.
I think, and my wife and I have talked about this, the genuineness of just the question, how are you doing? I think we miss that. And my wife and I, like I said, we talked about it. Scott Velasquez is great at that, because you can see it in his eyes. When he asks you, how are you doing? Like, he really wants to know how you're doing. It's not just a passive,
Right.
how are you doing? Like,
There's
that's
that
how
burning.
you get to know
Right.
someone. Like, that's
Care.
how, are you hurting? Like,
Right.
it's not just a, hey, how you doing? I really don't want to know. I don't want to hear exactly what you're going through. I'm just reaching out to be kind,
Right.
kind of thing.
And then listen.
Absolutely.
Ask the question and then sit down and listen.
Sometimes it's okay to just shut up.
Oh, a lot of times it's okay to shut up.
That's the most important part of talking, is listen
Yeah.
and don't say nothing and absorb the information.
Everyone should be slow to speak, quick to listen. Absolutely.
I've heard that somewhere.
Book of James. By Melvin.
Is there anything else that there's so much, we could talk about this for a long time. But I do want us to kind of pivot and say, what are additional specific things that we should challenge our church to do as we leave this place?
I think people of other race and majority of white race, as far as putting their self and our situation. Put their compassion as far as how we feel, or if someone would say a racial joke or anything like that. If they say that to you, how would you feel in the situation? Regardless if it was a black, white thing, but as a person itself, you would be hurt. You wouldn't want nobody to talk about your mother or your family. So that's pretty much what you're saying, because that's where I come from. I come from my mother. So when you say something that hurts me, you're hurting my whole family.
Sure.
And we try, as Christ followers, we try to not to attack in anger, but it's angry, and sometimes it comes off bad. But we just being truthful how we really feel. And you hurt me, and I don't think you should say that. And I think you should, understand that words do hurt, and you need to understand that you might want to be more conscious of what you say before you say something. Because if you hurt me, maybe somebody else that loves me gonna hurt you, and then that's a whole war that we don't want to deal with.
No, absolutely
We
not.
want to greet everybody in peace and love, and that's the way we should be.
Looking out for each other's interests over our own is what Paul said. And this is definitely a time for us to do that for our black friends and the black community of our world.
I think if I could nutshell it in 3 things that I think is a way to start, because obviously there's no way to line up every single thing that needs to be done. I think the first thing is something that we've already talked about, which is acknowledgement and understanding. Understanding where people of color are coming from, understanding the things that we have to deal with, understanding how we feel having to talk to our children about how to interact if they're pulled over by the police, or just understanding is so important, because I think that goes a long way to get past the defensiveness. I think the second thing is doing a gut check, asking ourselves, what are we doing? How are we interacting with people of color? How are we acting when we're in groups where there is no color? And I think the third thing that is even more important in my mind is being willing to actively advocate for change. And that's going to look different for different people, but you have to be willing to be progressive and be willing to speak out, and in your voting, selecting candidates who are going to be behind this agenda, being willing to speak out publicly about what's wrong, not just calling up your black friends and say, oh, I'm with you, but kind of letting us deal with the heavy lifting. We need our white brothers and sisters to be out there with us, not just protesting and holding up signs, but actually advocating in ways that are really going to help us see some change.
And also understanding in your circle, you may be the only ambassador to this type of change. So realizing how you speak about it and how you present it as important to you, how humankind is treated, not just, black folks. It's a human books as far as educating yourself about this. Lots of good books out there about how to be an
Recommendations?
ally. Oh my.
We can post them. I mean,
That would
if
be
you want
great.
to say, we can
I
post
do
these
have
later.
a few. I recently read a book. I'm forgetting the author's name. So You Want to Talk About Race? It's really good. One that's getting a lot of attention now, I think, is White Fragility, I think is the name of it. Also, Stamped. There's a reworking of a classic book, Stamped. It's a reworking now that's geared more toward young adult teenagers. It's really good. It just spells out sort of the history of black oppression in this country.
Wow.
It really spells it out and puts it easy to understand. And I want to say, this affects everyone. It may seem like this is just about communities of color, but when your brother is down, you can't be 100% good with that. You just can't. I mean, morally, it's not about politics. It's where you are aligning yourself morally, and where you're going to come down on this fight on the wrong or the right side of it.
Do you care?
Do you care?
I mean, it's basic compassion. Right? One of the things, as we talk about books, for the summer semester at Journeys Crossing, we're going to be starting small groups with the specific intention of reading one of those books or a book like that, and inviting people of diversity into that group so that you can get to know others, you can have these conversations. So if that's something that you're interested in, let us know at groups@journeyscrossing.org. And you're also welcome to start a group like that. I know that several of you are even in those groups. But this summer, as we move forward, I think that it would be a huge opportunity to learn and grow and connect using these groups. Some of this reading material would be one way to do that. Another thing we're doing is we'll be creating a task force that simply helps us as a church and our leadership keep this to the forefront. And Addie's going to be serving on that. If you'd be interested in participating in that, just email me, mark@journeyscrossing.org, and we'll start to form. And we're going to be doing some things over the next few months to continue this conversation. We want small groups where this becomes a focal point. We want to do some prayer walks and ask God to heal our country, our county, our nation. We're going to brainstorm. We're going to have more and more dialogue about this because this is the beginning. This isn't a one and done. So there's a number of things that all of us can do. And I think we're going to have more of this conversation tomorrow on our podcast. And one or two of you might be there either digitally or with us. There's so much more we could talk about. And I want to, and we're going to. Thank you. Love you guys so much.
Thank you, Mark. Love you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Why don't I close with prayer? God, you made us all one. You intentionally formed us, chose the color of our skin, the way our hair would curl or it would be straight, color of our eyes, our height, our abilities, from sports to create, to design, to think. There's so much beauty in the humanity. And we were meant to live together to express that beauty fully. And we are sorry that we have failed. And God, we want to be your church. We want to be your church in better ways. We need your forgiveness, God, for not taking the concerns of our Black brothers and sisters more seriously, for being indifferent or even apathetic, for those people of color with different ethnicities that we have simply coexisted with, and we haven't had the courage to step out of our own comfort to love them, to get to know them, to share their burdens and pain. Those are basic callings for everyone who follows you, Jesus. And this is a time for us to do that, just like you did, Jesus, for all of the people that are not being heard that live around us in Montgomery County, America, and around the world. Help us to be a people of justice, a people of peace, a people who are willing to step up, even if it might cost them, to have courage, to wrap their arms and their heart around somebody who may be different than them and listen and love them and to build them up. We ask your blessing on us as a church, God, and on each of these families represented. In Jesus' name, amen.
Hey, thanks everybody for coming out and hanging with us at JC Youth Online today. We're going to be doing a live replay of what we've done here at JC Youth Online, the whole conversation. We're going to have it again at 5 o'clock on our Youth Ministry Insta page. Journeys Crossing YM, so you can join us there. You can pause this video right now, get all of our contact information, call, email, text, all of that stuff, our website, our Sunday morning e-news that comes out at 7 a.m. every Sunday morning. You can check us out there. On social media, you can find us here. We've got Insta, Facebook, and Twitter, and that's updated regularly, so check that out. You can stay connected daily to what we're trying to do as a youth ministry by checking us out at Instagram at noon every day for our daily prayer time. Very, very short, and you can come and join us to pray along. Please come tonight to continue the conversation live at our debriefing groups, our video chat rooms. Tonight at 6 o'clock, the information is in the description below. Next Sunday on June 14th, we're going to be honoring our seniors as a part of JC Youth Online, so be a part of that. If you haven't sent your pictures to me yet, seniors, please do that. I need those today by the end of the day. All right, cool. Well, we'll see you either tonight at 5 on Insta or at debriefing groups at 6. Really want to thank you for coming and being a part of this conversation. It's an important one that we need to have, and hope it was helpful. Check out the debriefing group links in the description box below. All right, guys, we will see you this week or next week. We miss you. We love you. We're out.